Hello, my friends, project managers, portfolio managers, program managers, wherever you may be. Welcome to our discussion about the standards for portfolio management, part one. In this episode, we'll be taking a look at the standard for portfolio management, and we'll be focusing on the first chapter. But at a really high level, the standard for portfolio management published by the PMI is broken down into 8 chapters. The very first is the introduction, which is what we're going to cover today. The second chapter is the portfolio life cycle. The third chapter is portfolio strategic management. The fourth chapter is portfolio governance. The fifth chapter is portfolio capacity and capability management. And sixth chapter is portfolio stakeholder engagement. And that's followed by portfolio value management. And lastly, portfolio risk management. So let's start off with the very first chapter. It's called the introduction. In the introduction here, we're going to discuss why portfolio management in the first place. Why should we be thinking about portfolio management? What is it? At a super high level, portfolio management has been said to be choosing the right work. In other words, the work in the organization that we choose to do needs to be chosen with a lot of consideration, with a lot of knowledge and understanding of the organization's strategic business objectives. In addition to that, we also need to know the organization's vision and mission. Anyone who is a portfolio manager should have a macro view of the organization and understand what the goals of the enterprise are. So let's jump straight into it and talk about 1.1, the standard for portfolio management presents portfolio management principles and performance domains that are generally recognized as good practices for organizations that have business needs to effectively manage complex and intense program and project investments. In 1.1, we highlight the importance of the standard in that it contains a common unified vocabulary. Now, a lot of the information in this body of knowledge is also contained in other documents from the PMI. You could look at this standard as a companion to the PMBOK Guide, 6th edition. Let's move on to 1.2. In 1.2, we address the audience for the standard. Many organizations talk about portfolios, but very few organizations actually realize what portfolio management is through and through. And that's why this audience should consist of senior executives and governance boards who make decisions about organizational strategy, management staff responsible for developing organizational strategy, or those making recommendations to senior executives, program managers, project managers, portfolio managers, and practitioners, of course, and researchers analyzing portfolio management, not to mention managers of portfolios associated with the overarching portfolio, or even partnering with an organization with a robust portfolio. Consultants would fall into this category, other specialists, business and technical professionals, auditors for sure, trainers and engineers, many individuals, operations managers, operations unit managers, those in construction, civil engineers, those involved in mega projects, of course, because all of these will taper into a portfolio. So what is a portfolio? A portfolio, simply put, is all the work that an entity is working on at any point in time. We could say the entity is an organization. We could say it's a business unit. We could say it's some other function within the firm. But when we say portfolio, think about it as a collection of projects, programs, subsidiary portfolios, and operations managed collectively as a group to achieve an organization's strategic business objectives. And the portfolio components within this overarching portfolio may not necessarily be related. You could have a program that has no relation whatsoever to a sub-portfolio, and a sub-portfolio that has absolutely no relation to some standalone project. But collectively, they are being worked to achieve the organization's strategic business objectives. When we talk about the components of a portfolio, bear in mind that they are quantifiable. That means they are identified, categorized, evaluated, prioritized, and authorized. It's not just some random work that came our way, but it is well thought out and intentional. It should be. Also, the portfolio components may be, like I said, unrelated, or they could be related. They could be independent, standalone, or they could be interdependent. And the objectives may or may not be related. A portfolio exists for one reason: organizational, strategic, business objectives. And you can hear this spoken about in many ways. You might hear someone say business unit strategies, organizational and business unit strategies and goals. The bottom line is the organization has a strategy, the organization has an overarching vision, and there are going to be goals along the way to accomplish the mission that supports the vision. And that's exactly what portfolios do. Now, like programs and projects, portfolios have a life cycle. However, unlike programs and projects, which have a more truncated or limited, if you will, duration, portfolios have a greater longevity. Why? Because the multiple components within a portfolio may not be concurrent. They span across different disjointed time periods. For example, you could have a program that is 2 years long and another project that is 1 year long and a sub-portfolio component that is 3 years long, and they may all be sequential. There may be absolutely no overlap, or maybe there is. But the bottom line is portfolios are generally longer term. Now, given portfolios longer term, new components can churn into portfolios and their sub-portfolios. Portfolio closure could occur when the portfolio is no longer required, or when the intended objectives are achieved, or when the portfolio components are decommissioned. As I said in the very beginning, we could say a portfolio is all the work being undertaken by the firm. Now, some organizations may decide to slice and dice their work in different ways. So we could say an organization has 5 portfolios, 10 portfolios, 20 portfolios. It really depends. An organization could have a portfolio to address each unique or different organizational strategy. You could have a portfolio for each business unit. You could have a portfolio for each function. Proposed new initiatives that could evolve into programs or projects could be placed into an existing portfolio. Or maybe we create a totally new portfolio depending. In addition, larger projects may contain sub-portfolios, and they're usually structured as a hierarchy. And this is well represented in PMI's documentation. Programs, projects, or functional unit portfolios could reside within a larger business unit portfolio, which in turn is nested into one portfolio in the entire enterprise. And that's why I said in an organization, you could have multiple levels of portfolios, the overarching company portfolio and lower level portfolios for each business unit. Now, common project portfolios include product lines. You could choose to have portfolios in that way, or you could choose information technology portfolios, enterprise project portfolios, and so many others. In addition, portfolios could be internal or external to the organization. They could exist at various levels of the organization: enterprise, divisional, business unit, and functional. And portfolios could be organized separately, but they can also be organized in a hierarchical structure. Portfolios can support both the core functions as well as the support functions of an organization. So, at any time, a portfolio is a collection of its selected portfolio components and reflects one or more organizational strategies and objectives for that point in time. I would advise you to take a look at the Portfolio Management Standard 4th edition on page 4, and you can see how nesting occurs. Programs being part of a sample portfolio and a portfolio being part of a sample portfolio, nested. It is important for you to get that visual. Let's move on to our next one. 1.4 talks about relationships among portfolios, programs, projects, and operations. Now, I've spoken about this quite a few times, and if it's something you already know, you might want to skip this point, full disclaimer. But when we talk about relationships between portfolios, programs, and projects, first of all, they should be managed in an intentional and orderly fashion according to an organizational project management standard. When we talk about this collection of projects, programs, and operations, we need to understand why they are being grouped. It's to achieve those strategic objectives. And the relationship among these components have a potential to bring value, tangible value, intangible value through portfolio management. It's also the criterion on which they are evaluated and added to the portfolio. Programs are grouped within a portfolio, and they include related projects and sub-programs and program activities. We could even talk about programs containing an operational sort of work. So bear in mind that there's a lot of nesting that happens when we talk about portfolios. There's often the question, Phil, what is a sub-portfolio? I tell people a sub-portfolio is just a chunk of the portfolio that is too big to be called a program, or different from what you would say a program is in a particular company. It's all in context. Sometimes it might be semantics, and other times it might be economies of scale. But typically, when we say a sub-portfolio, the sub-portfolio components are grouped together for convenience and to achieve that strategic business objective. Individual projects that have strategic importance, whether within or outside a program, are considered as part of a portfolio. I call them standalone projects. Although the programs of projects within a portfolio may not be directly related or interdependent, they are linked to the organization's strategic plan by means of the portfolio they are in. A very important term is organizational planning because this impacts projects by means of project prioritization based on risk, based on funding, resource constraints, and other considerations. Organizational planning can direct the time and resources spent on projects, programs, components of programs, and so on. All portfolio components should exhibit certain features that include representing how the organization will achieve its strategic goals and objectives through the portfolio and its components, representing the organization's investment priorities to achieve its strategy, requiring management and governance that includes allocating and sharing resources, and having the ability to be quantifiable and therefore evaluated, measured, ranked, and prioritized. And lastly, having the ability to be directed or controlled to accomplish portfolio value. And that is a relationship among portfolios, programs, and projects. Let's talk about portfolio management. What exactly is it? Portfolio management is the centralized management of one or more portfolios to achieve strategic objectives. You keep hearing that word, strategic objectives, and strategy, because strategy is geared at the vision, how do we realize the overarching vision? And therefore, the strategy must include an understanding of goals that support the mission to get to the vision. It is the application of portfolio management principles to align the portfolio and its components with the organizational strategy. We could look at portfolio management as dynamic activity through which an organization invests its resources in the best and most sensible endeavors to achieve its strategic objectives. Before taking on any work in a portfolio, you should identify, categorize, monitor, evaluate, integrate, select, prioritize, optimize, balance, authorize, transition, control, and terminate portfolio components. So there's a whole lot of stuff for the portfolio management expert to do. Let's go on to 1.6 and talk about the relationships between portfolio management, program management, and project management. Now, I've already talked about OPM, organizational project management, and how this is the intentional and planned approach to managing those portfolio components. Portfolio management balances conflicting demands among portfolio components. It allocates resources, be they human, financial, intellectual, and so on. The focus of program management is on achieving those benefits and business outcomes for which the program was intended. That's the focus of program management. Project management is concerned with achieving specific project deliverables, and portfolio management is all about strategic business objectives. Portfolio, program, and project management should be aligned with and driven by organizational strategy and other business drivers. Conversely, portfolio, program, and project management contributes to the achievement and implementation of strategic objectives. Let's move on to the principles of portfolio management. This is on page 6. Organizational strategies and the objectives serve to establish and guide an organization's decisions, direction, purpose, and resource allocations to achieve targeted values. These values can be broad or narrow depending on organizational mission and vision. Extrinsic values may be market, social, political, and environmental. Intrinsic values such as competency, talent, culture, growth, development, and competitiveness are also part of considerations. When we talk about fundamental principles that are core to portfolio management, they are as follows. 1, strive to achieve excellence in strategic execution. 2, enhance transparency, responsibility, accountability, sustainability, and fairness. 3, balance the portfolio value against overall risks. 4, ensure that the investments in portfolio components are aligned with the organization's strategy. 5, obtain and maintain the sponsorship and engagement of senior management and key stakeholders. 6, exercise active and decisive leadership for the optimization, watch that word, we're going to come back to that in the future, of resource utilization. 7, foster a culture that embraces change and risk. And 8, navigate complexity to enable successful outcomes. And the purpose of these principles is to provide guidance to portfolio management practitioners in the conceptualization, implementation, and ongoing management of portfolios. These are the things a portfolio manager does. Let's go on to 1.8. 1.8 is about the relationships among portfolio management. Going up to the higher levels now, organizational strategy, strategic business execution, and organizational project management, which I talked about earlier. Organizational strategy helps define specific goals and objectives for the organization. To maintain and sustain competitiveness, organizations require strong strategic execution to implement their portfolios, their programs and projects, not just occasionally, but consistently and repeatedly over time. And this requires organizations to be intentional in their portfolio management. It also requires organizations to adopt strong disciplines that revolve around the concept of OPM. And I'm not talking about other people's money. OPM stands for Organizational Project Management. Now, value is the primary focus of portfolio management. It's defined as the net quantifiable benefits or worth and usefulness of the organization, the total sum of all tangible and intangible elements. Examples of tangible elements are shareholder satisfaction, utility, stockholder equity. Examples of intangible elements could be brand recognition, goodwill, reputation, legacy, patents, trademarks. Now, business value can be defined in terms of its short, medium, or long-term realization. Value is created through the effective management of ongoing operations. Moving ahead here into 1.8.1, let's talk about portfolio management and organizational strategy. An organizational strategy is composed of goals and policies that provide the overall direction and focus of the organization. And that's why when you see organizations tank and collapse, you realize they didn't have an overarching vision guided by a robust mission with goals to get there. This is depicted in PMI's figure 1-2. We see at the pinnacle of that pyramid, you have the vision, then the mission. And from the mission flow the organizational strategy and objectives, then portfolio management, and that tapers into projects, programs, operations. Organizational resources uphold and support the vision and mission. And that's how it's meant to flow. Vision, mission, strategy, portfolio. The organizational strategy and objectives are translated into a set of initiatives that are influenced by many factors. We could talk about enterprise environmental factors for one. We could talk about customer and partner requests and shareholders and government regulations, and all of these are really enterprise environmental factors. The initiatives in the firm establish a portfolio of programs, projects, and operations. And it's been very well documented in 1.8.1, the relationship, the direction that vision, mission, and organizational strategy objectives provide to portfolio management strategic planning. Let's talk about 1.8.2, which is strategic business execution and organizational management. Portfolio management, program management, and project management are domains of organizational project management. When I studied for my organizational project management maturity model exam, I had to read the standard for portfolio management, program management, and project management. And that's how I became more and more interested in this topic. Strategic business execution and organizational project management starts off with a statement. Program, portfolio, and project management are domains of OPM. No wonder I had to study them all to be OPM 3 certified. Now, that certification has since been discontinued with the PMI, but in my studying for that certification, it was very clear that OPM will enable a firm to leverage its results and implementation success and support the organization with a competitive and rapidly changing environment at its core, it's important to have programs, projects, and portfolios interacting, adapting, and responding to change, mercilessly cutting off those things that are no longer representative of the strategic business objectives or will no longer support the strategic goals. So when we talk about killing off those components that are not helpful in the world of project management, like scrapping a phase, at a much higher level, we talk about abandoning a project, closing it down because it no longer supports the firm. An organization establishes goals that will move towards its vision. And if the vision cannot be supported by a program or a portfolio component, it needs to be shut down. Once a portfolio component is authorized, the program or project manager assumes direct management control of that component and applies management processes from the OPM mindset that exists in the firm. Portfolio components don't exist in isolation. Each portfolio includes diverse components. It's part of the entire organizational system of interrelated components, and each portfolio is simultaneously a part of the entire organizational system. It's important to think in that way. One of the components of portfolio management is the portfolio life cycle. And we're going to talk about the portfolio life cycle and the domains that surround it. So the ultimate goal of linking portfolio management and organizational strategy and strategic business execution is to establish a balanced, realistic plan that will help the organization achieve its goals. The impact of the portfolio management plan upon strategy is attained through 6 performance domains and the portfolio life cycle. Let's take a look at this in a little bit more detail. For this, we will go to our whiteboard where I can paint a picture of coherence for you. Let's start off with what is in the nucleus. Right here in the nucleus, we start off with the portfolio life cycle. And let's draw this picture for you. Here we go. Let's get the tools going. Right there in the nucleus. That's the portfolio life cycle, right there in the middle. And I'm just going to say portfolio life cycle. You get the idea. Hopefully, these abbreviations will jog your memory. For those of you getting ready for your portfolio management professional exam, why don't you draw along? Let's see if you can preempt what comes next. All right, the layer that is outside of that, we have the actual terminology for you to understand the life cycle. Let's draw that. Here we go. And here we have something very similar to the world of project management, but it splits off after a while. So we have initiation, we have planning, we have execution, and lastly, we have the big O, optimization, which is by far most important. You got to optimize to be effective. After that, we have yet another ring, and this is linked further to 6 additional components, which we call portfolio management performance domains. And I will show them to you, starting with the portfolio strategic management section. Let's put that right here. And that is followed by portfolio governance right here. That is followed by portfolio capacity and capability management, somewhere around here. That is followed by portfolio stakeholder engagement. Can you preempt what comes next, my portfolio management professionals? Do you still remember all this stuff? And lastly, portfolio risk management. So let's go ahead and pencil in what exactly these names are to make it small as possible. Portfolio governance. It's the first one over there. And then below that, we have portfolio strategic management. Up here, we have portfolio capacity and capability management. Okay, and you could draw along, and we have portfolio stakeholder engagement next. Then we have portfolio value management, portfolio and lastly, we have portfolio risk management. And we're going to talk about these one by one before we shut this down. I know some of you might have been wondering, only one chapter? Yeah, portfolio is a beast. If we're really going to do it justice, we should spend an hour plus on every single chapter, and then we should spend double that on the exercises. So what you have on the screen here, just remember, you have 6 portfolio management performance domains that represent the collection of good practices. This describes each portfolio management performance domain briefly. Follow me to page 10 in the standard for portfolio management. And let's start off talking about what is in the nucleus, the PLC, the portfolio life cycle. Portfolios are a major investment of organizational resources, and like programs and projects, portfolios go through a life cycle that includes initiation, planning, execution, and optimization. The diligent management of the life cycle by balancing stability with adaptability is crucial for managing activity in today's constantly changing environment. Let's now talk about portfolio strategic management, and I will box them or point to them with the spotlight. So we're talking about this one right here. Each portfolio component should be aligned to one or more strategic objectives, and the positive impact should be constantly monitored. This is what is meant by the term strategic management in the portfolio management context, and it's achieved by a clear understanding of strategic objectives and how important each component is in relation to those objectives. Any proposal for including a component in the portfolio should describe how it supports the attainment of intended business value. All right, we're moving up here to the next one, portfolio governance. Through open and transparent governance, including processes for categorizing, prioritizing, selecting, and approving portfolio components, key stakeholders are likely to accept the decisions and agree with the process, even when they may not fully endorse the decisions made. What is governance at a high level? Remember, the term governance is the framework through which authority is exercised. Here at the portfolio level, there also needs to be governance. Next, we have portfolio capacity and capability management. The selection of portfolio components and the roadmap for their implementation is based on the organization's current capacity and capability. How much capacity do they have to take on new work? What capabilities have they to execute on that work successfully? The portfolio view allows for future planning to develop capacity and capabilities as required. Next, we have portfolio stakeholder engagement. Key portfolio stakeholders require active expectation management. By staying aligned and connected, portfolios improve the probability of delivering value. Active communication is a primary vehicle through which the exchange of information, improved transparency, and stakeholder buy-in are all achieved. Next, we have portfolio value management. This enables investment in a portfolio to yield the expected return as defined by the organizational strategy. And last but not least, here we have portfolio risk management. This evaluates risks at the portfolio level and considers how those risks may impact the achievement of the portfolio strategic plan and objectives. So a lot of stuff to talk about here. Let's move back into the rest of this chapter. Very robust chapter indeed. Moving on to 1.9, portfolio components and their interrelationships. We have said it quite a number of times. A portfolio consists of components. Now, a portfolio is a system or collection of entities called portfolio components, plus a collection of interrelationships among those components. As a portfolio system, the portfolio's hierarchy results in a parent-child relationship. We did talk about this earlier. Then we go into program management, which we know is the management of two or more interrelated projects. Program management is the application of knowledge, skills, tools, and techniques to those components of a program to meet the program requirements and to obtain benefits and control not available by managing projects individually. When we say benefits, we got to be thinking value. When we talk about value, we got to be thinking benefits. They are interrelated terms. Let's move on to project management. It's the application of knowledge, skills, tools, and techniques. Knowledge, skills, tools, and techniques to project activities to meet project requirements. Operations management. Operations management is a business function for planning, coordinating resources, and controlling the repeatable, cyclical, day-to-day activities of the organization. What is the role of the portfolio manager? Well, like I said, portfolio managers must choose the right work. What are the other roles in portfolio management? Let's examine these roles one by one. Sponsors, portfolio governance bodies, portfolio analysts, program managers, project managers, change control board, program and project team members, and also subject matter experts. Now, when we talk about the role of the portfolio manager, it relates to a lot of these that I just mentioned. The portfolio manager reviews the portfolio for balance. The portfolio manager regularly communicates information and recommends criteria for governance actions. The portfolio manager needs to be aware of how the portfolio is related to the organization's vision, mission, and strategic goals. Other things that the portfolio manager is involved in includes portfolio strategic management and alignment, portfolio management methods and techniques. They should have expertise in the application and analysis of portfolio management methods. They should have experience in stakeholder engagement and, of course, leadership, risk management, and organizational change management, and high level systems thinking. When it comes to these final sub aspects of 1.11, these just go into overarching responsibilities. The sponsor, for example, is a person or group who provides resources and support for the portfolio. The portfolio governance body is also important here. What is governance? Again, it's a framework, functions, and processes established by the governing body and set by the organization to guide portfolio management activities. Next, we have the PMO, Portfolio Office, Portfolio Management Office, Project Management Office, Program Office, all those terms. And we do know what these do for us in the firm: identifying, analyzing, coordinating, negotiating, monitoring, and controlling portfolio components, developing and maintaining a portfolio framework and method. Basically, order, structure, and help at all levels, be it portfolio, program, or project. Let's move on to our final ones here. We have program managers, and program managers are responsible for ensuring that overall program structure and program management processes align with the portfolio management plan. And of course, project managers are responsible for the effective initiation, planning, execution, monitoring, and controlling and closing of assigned projects. Remember, portfolio management is doing the right work. Project management is doing the work right. I hope you realize from this that portfolio management is a beast and there's a lot to tackle. If this is something that's of interest to you, you can absolutely do it. It just requires focus and dedication, as all the other certifications. If you've enjoyed this, don't forget to hit like, don't forget to hit subscribe, and don't forget to share it with your friends. I wish you all the very best in your project management endeavors. Bye for now. I actually should say, if you have enjoyed this, do let me know if you would like the additional chapters to be covered. I'm curious to know if we have any of our listeners, any of our students who have taken the portfolio management professional exam or are thinking of doing so. So do let us know. Take care.